Broadcasting from the world headquarters of the National Floor Safety Institute is America's slip and fall guy, Russ.
This is America's Slip and Fall Guy, Russ Kenzior. Thanks for listening to my podcast. You know, in the world of slips, trips, and falls, there's many different battles being fought, and oftentimes it's the housekeeping or maintenance janitorial staff that serves on the front line. In fact, unlike risk managers and even safety managers, slips, trips, and falls can be more readily addressed by those people who are actually on site each and every day working towards making walkways safer. Joining me today is Michael Patterson with the International Executive Housekeepers Association. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning, Russ.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization, the International Executive Housekeepers Association.
All right, great. Well, I guess I'll start with the International Executive Housekeepers Association. IEHA, which is International Executive Housekeepers Association, has been around since 1930, so it's a relatively old organization. It was established by 17 ladies in the state of New York, all who were either managers or directors of housekeeping. They formed an association, and the first 24 years of our organization, it was all females. It wasn't until the latter part of 1954 is when they allowed men to join the organization. The organization itself is comprised of individuals from all different types of sectors, such as healthcare, hospitality, the government, could be museums, convention centers, even amusement parks. What we basically do is we take individuals and we make them strong leaders through our certification program. So our program is based a lot on education. Obviously, we're a member-based organization. We're international, so we have members all over the world that are part of our organization that are in roles such as managers, directors, project managers, vice presidents of organizations. We even have some presidents of organizations that are members of IEHA. With our certification program, it's a 1 year. It's a 1 year membership. The certification itself lasts for 2 years. Once you earn the designation, and from there, you have opportunities to grow into other areas of education that we offer.
Now, how are you related to the International Sanitary Supply Association, or the ISSA? There's a relationship between the two organizations. Is that correct?
That is very correct. IHA merged with ISSA, the International Sanitary Supply Association, in 2017. However, we were their first co-location partner, which we established a relationship with ISSA in 1999. So I tell people we essentially dated for 18 years and then we got married in 2017.
Well, that's interesting. You know, it's the first point you made regarding the establishment or the foundation of the IEHA by women. It's something that a lot of people take for granted. But, you know, going back in time, housekeeping, cleaning, janitorial services were originally a woman's job, and it was a dirty job. I mean, it's not an easy job to do. And it's interesting when you mentioned that the foundation of your organization was exclusively women and then began to open their doors to men. It's important to respect the work of women in this industry, dating back, probably to the beginning of time. And so that was a little interesting background. For those listening, oftentimes they associate the term or the profession of housekeeping to that of janitorial services. Is there a difference between a housekeeper and a janitor?
Yeah, there is a huge difference. I mean, while the terms may be synonymous, they are uniquely different. You have individuals that work as janitors, for example, And a janitor may be the typical person you see in your commercial building or in apartment buildings or whatever that do the respective cleaning and maybe even some minor maintenance type of work. But their primary duties may be that of cleaning, very similar to that of a housekeeper. So, housekeeper, that term has been around for many, many, many years. And you have individuals that may be in healthcare, in hospitality, in even in your home. Those they may have the title of a housekeeper, and they do primarily the general cleaning. But you also have the term of a custodian. So what do you say is the difference? Well, a custodian is typically an individual that may only be unique to one specific setting, very similar to a housekeeper, whereas a janitor may go from building to building or go from place to place. My mother, Russ, was a custodian in the Chicago Board of Education system. She was very specific to one high school in the city of Chicago and went on to become their lead custodian.
Wow. Well, it's interesting you should say that. My father, when I was growing up, actually had a part-time job doing the same thing. He had done maintenance work and cleaning for several clients in the Chicago area. I'm also from Chicago originally, so I have a family relationship to the industry and its level of professionalism. And I think that's one thing important for our listeners to know is there is a various levels of this profession, whether you be a janitor, custodian, or housekeeper. And I think that's what your organization represents as the professional housekeeper, the person who has a very high level of education and understanding of the process of cleaning. And of course, part of cleaning means safety. But how is it, Michael, you got into this business? Was it through your experience with your mother?
No, actually, my segue was very unique, probably different than most. I worked on the receiving dock at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. So I was born and raised in Chicago. Was working on the receiving dock as one of the lead storekeepers was a title, which was essentially a lead person underneath the manager. The administrator, the department director became an administrator and essentially called me in the office and said, "Hey, I'm going to move you over to environmental services." And I basically, Russ, said, "Well, hey, I don't know anything about cleaning. I clean at home, but healthcare, I don't know anything about." He told me that he thought I would be good at it, and he would be moving me into that particular department. On my way out of the door, he handed me a pamphlet, which was the National Executive Housekeepers Association before IEHA became international, and told me that I needed to join this organization and I needed to get certified and I had to complete the program within the required time. And otherwise I would lose my job, essentially is what he told me. So I embraced the concept. They trained me in the department for about 4 months because I was becoming the training coordinator. Cook County Hospital, for those that probably don't know about Cook County Hospital, but it's a very large government hospital in the city of Chicago, and it's a teaching hospital. So the department at that time had about 400 FTEs, 2 assistant directors, eight managers, 16 supervisors, but 1 training coordinator. So that's why they spent a lot of time training me personally, as well as ensuring that I went through this particular course in order to get certified so that I would understand pretty much everything I needed to know about housekeeping and even how to run a department, how to manage a department, how to be an effective leader. So from there, I've just kind of blossomed over the years. I had the privilege of serving as the executive housekeeper for Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. A very huge honor for me to serve as their executive housekeeper before moving to IEHA, most recently in 2017 as the executive director for IEHA.
Wow. Wow, that's quite an accomplishment. So you've been in the industry quite a while.
Yeah, I've been in the industry about 30 years now, a little over 30, maybe 31, 32 years, and have had a great career. But it was only because of a gentleman that thought enough of me or saw something in me that he pushed me to move into environmental services. And so I blossomed from there.
So you had a mentor, didn't you?
Exactly. Yes.
Well, like many in your industry, in fact, I've spoken at several of your programs just recently, in a matter of fact, in Las Vegas, and it is a mentoring type of business. I mean, the way you learn the proper procedures of maintenance, cleaning, sanitation, disinfectants, and that sort of thing is through not only education and training, but through mentorship. In fact, if you want to learn the right way to do something, learn from someone that knows how to do it right. And I guess that's true for people who do it wrong. In fact, that's one of the things we're going to be speaking about today is how to not properly clean, for example, floors as to make them potentially dangerous or hazardous. And with that, how big of a problem for your industry, for the housekeeping industry, are slips, trips, and falls? Is this a big problem that your industry faces?
Absolutely. More especially in the healthcare setting, because I came out of the healthcare, but it's applicable to pretty much industry-wide in terms of housekeeping. It could be done. It could be for a number of reasons. What I've found over the years is that individuals make mistakes. It could be a training issue. The employees were never trained properly. It could be an issue where in healthcare, the doctors, the nurses, it's fast paced, so everyone is avoiding or walking in areas where they shouldn't walk. So they avoid the areas that are safe to walk on and walk in the areas that are unsafe. Even though you may have your wet floor signs down and things like that. So it is probably the number one cause of injuries, especially in the healthcare setting with employees. It's going to be due to slips, trips, and falls.
Wow. It's oftentimes my experience working on litigation matters where somebody will fall, a guest will fall, and oftentimes the management of the company or the business where the fall took place will blame somebody else. They'll usually wind up blaming the maintenance professional, the janitor, the housekeeper, the guy that was waxing the floor, polishing the floor the night before. He's the one that made the floor slippery. I'm sure you hear this quite a bit in your industry where, the housekeeping people ultimately become kind of the fall guy. They get blamed for slips and falls or trips and falls when they happen as a result of improper maintenance. And that's oftentimes not a fair, assessment. It's kind of a bum rap to just blame the maintenance people, but I'm sure you hear that all the time. Am I right?
You're 100% right. It normally will default automatically. Let me say it this way. It's assumed that environmental services or housekeeping did something wrong. They immediately say, the housekeeper did something. So that's why it's so important that, and we train our individuals to make sure that as you grow your staff, you're training them correctly. You're documenting the training. You want to make sure they use their wet floor signs. You want to make sure they're using the right chemicals. You want to make sure the chemicals are diluted correctly. A lot of different factors will tie to it. And then with the use of cameras in hospitals or hotels or whatever, that plays a part, because if someone walks on your floor and you have your wet floor signs properly positioned and they walk in the incorrect area, even though it's roped off or sectioned off, it then becomes the guest's fault or the employee's fault that actually fail.
Right. Well, in the blame game, there's always somebody to blame. But how important of of a role, in your opinion, do housekeepers, janitors, custodians play in preventing slips and falls? How big of a role do you think your industry can play in preventing these types of injuries?
Well, they play a large part of it. I mean, if you see an obstruction, Russ, for example, if you see an obstruction, they need to fix it or get someone to fix it. If you're polishing or waxing the floor, so to speak, you want to make sure that you're doing it. You want to make sure that the employee, again, is doing it correctly. Things like that, you can help prevent scenarios. If an area is unsafe walking, you need to address it and fix the scenario. But if you leave it, something is going to happen. Someone's going to ultimately fall and potentially hurt themselves. Mm-hmm. So the employee, the supervisor, the managers, everybody has to be a part of the solution. Otherwise, they become part of the problem.
Now, are falls a big problem for the people in your industry, meaning housekeepers? Do they experience a lot of falls, meaning workplace-related injuries as a result of a slip or trip?
Typically, no. Will it happen occasionally? Yes. But typically, no, because most organizations now are going to slip-resistant shoes and make it mandatory. This is myself. I've always made it mandatory for my teams to wear slip-resistant shoes in order to prevent these type of scenarios, because they're working with areas where they're going to use water. They're working in areas where they're going to use chemicals and things. And so it's important that they wear slip-resistant shoes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned chemicals, floor cleaning products, floor finishes, various types of products and procedures that are used to maintain floors. And of course, that's one of the issues that's directly associated to slips and falls. Who generally makes the decision, Michael, on cleaning products, cleaning programs, cleaning supplies, cleaning equipment? I mean, who within your industry makes those calls? Is it the housekeeper, the company that's providing the housekeeper, or is it ultimately your customer, the people that are hiring you, that makes that call?
Generally, Russ, that becomes the responsibility of the director of housekeeping or the executive housekeeper for the various for that particular institution. Oftentimes, they will design it so that the executive housekeeper or director will be an influencer, but the ultimate decision is left up to maybe the vice president of that particular department or the administrator for that particular department. But he or she doesn't have the technical knowledge most times, so they do what? They default back to or defer back to the actual director because they have the technical knowledge or should have the technical knowledge in order to be able to select the right chemicals or the right cleaning equipment and so forth.
Right. Well, you bring up an excellent point, having the technical knowledge. Not all floor cleaners, floor finishes provide the same level of safety or traction. The National Floor Safety Institute, as you know, has a product certification program where manufacturers can submit their products to the NFSI for independent testing and upon approval become an NFSI approved product. Is that something that's important in your industry, the use of NFSI certified products?
Absolutely. I know that as a director, I would look for those types of, I would look for the certification to make sure that I know that any product that we put on the floor is going to be something that has already been tested and has some type of, I won't necessarily use the word warranty, but has been tested and has been used by other individuals that can say, in fact, that this product is one that you should use, has the right slip coefficients and so forth and so on.
Right. Well, it's funny. I was just at the International Sanitary Supply Association program in Las Vegas, in fact, doing a presentation with your organization. And I was pleasantly surprised to see how many products are being displayed and promoted within the janitorial industry regarding NFSI product certification. In fact, it would appear that really has become the industry standard for the janitorial industry to be an NFSI certification. That seems to be the new bar. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. It's a very fair assessment, and it's one that's extremely important. I think it's great that NFSI exists and does research, does product testing, and things in order to help the companies as well. This helps the manufacturers as well, and it allows them, or it positions them, to say, "Hey, you know what? We are certified or approved by NFSI. Look at our products. Give us an opportunity." So I think it's great.
Right. Well, that's really what it was set out to do, is create a level playing field. And so if a particular cleaning agent or cleaning product or piece of equipment is being used, it gives that assurance to both the user and of the equipment or product and the customer that it's not going to create an unreasonably dangerous condition. And in fact, not every cleaning product is certified, and some of them are more provide a greater slip resistance benefit than others. But the process was one that was designed really for you and your industry and the janitorial industry as a whole. And again, I was just really kind of blown away on how many NFSI certified products were being displayed at the show. And really how important it really has become. And it was just kind of a bit of a surprise. I don't go to your show often. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I was there, as I mentioned a moment ago, to do some training. So let's talk about training. How is it, Michael, that members of the IEHA are trained in the area of safety in terms of slip and fall or trip and fall prevention? How do you go about providing training to your members?
Well, there's a couple of different things there. Obviously, every institution is a little different, but IEHA specifically, as we do our training with the various management level individuals or executive level, obviously safety is extremely important. We talk about NFSI as well as just going through just general things that they need to understand. The safety piece ties heavily to training. So we spend a lot of time going over the not only the importance of training, how to train, but also the documentation side of it. So we spend quite a bit of time in one of our modules as they complete their modules, because our program, IEHA certification program, is broken down into 16 modules, one of which obviously deals with the environmental services or housekeeping as a specific module itself. So in that, we talk a lot about a lot of different factors, but the training aspect of it is so important because you can have the best program in the world. You can talk about it, may look great on paper, but if you do not train the employees correctly and they understand it, it's going to be a problem. So we spend a lot of time with the science behind cleaning and having them understand the various components of it.
Now, once you're retained, hired by a particular company, say it's a hospital, how is the subject of safety communicated between the housekeeper and the organization that's hiring the housekeeper? I mean, it's a partnership, right? I mean, you do your part, they have to do their part. It's a joint effort. There's got to be a joint investment. How do you normally interact, Michael, with the client, the hospital, for example, on really approaching fall prevention? Because it's not just the janitor, the maintenance people, or the housekeeper's role. It's everybody's job. I mean, you mentioned in the hospital industry, working in a training hospital where you have doctors and nurses and an entire staff of people, not to mention patients, who are engaged in this issue where there might be an accidental spill or trafficking of some type of a substance on a person's shoes. So I guess in a nutshell, how do you and your in your industry and your customers, your clients, the people that hire you, how is it that you collectively approach this subject of fall prevention?
Well, it's extremely important, especially in the healthcare sector, because there's so many different variables. Let's take, for example, a nursing home. Nursing homes, as you know, could potentially have a high degree of slips, trips, and falls. Why? Because you're dealing with the elderly. So you know they build it around making sure they have the right flooring in place, whether they're using a vinyl floor, versus ceramic or something that it's going to be potentially unsafe. Carpet, on the other hand, is probably the best in nursing homes. In a healthcare setting in a hospital, obviously they're getting away from the carpet side of it for obvious reasons. But what I would do is I worked with the various departments. So as a new executive housekeeper, I sat down with every department. I talked about different things. Obviously, I want to know a little bit about the departments, but one of the things I would talk about would be safety and making sure that we provided a safe environment that was wholesome to patient care. However, with that piece, as you said earlier, it has to be a partnership. So if you see something on the floor, you pick it up. You observe a hazard, you notify someone. If I saw someone that walked past a slip hazard or a trip hazard or whatever, and they didn't attempt to correct it, they just looked at it and kept walking, I would go to the department head and I would have that kind of conversation where I observed your employee. I saw a potential hazard. Fortunately, no one was injured. I called the department to take care of it, but your employee didn't. So these are areas that I would work. This is how I would broach it and work with the department so that everybody has a hand in it. Because at the end of the day, if something happens, it's, as we said earlier, it's going to go back to housekeeping first.
Right. We just found ourselves working in this area of training in the virtual reality space, virtual reality training. And a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mark Fagiano, who's a associate professor at University of Central Florida. And I think you may have met him. He's been to several of our conferences and meetings. And Dr. Fagiano actually came up with a virtual reality training program designed for hospitals, where the folks that work within the hospital, not just housekeepers, but everybody that's involved in the cleaning or maintenance of floors, basically has a virtual reality experience where they put a headset on and they feel like they're in their hospital. In fact, it's recorded. The program is actually recorded in their hospital, and they have to go through various stages. For example, they'll start in the parking lot, and there will be different types of hazards created intentionally for the training, and they have to identify them. They have to appropriately identify each one of the hazards, and then once they accomplish that, they get to go into the lobby. They do the same thing in the lobby. They then go down a typical corridor. And throughout the entire training, an hospital employee literally does a virtual audit, if you will, from their parking lot all the way through their facility. And the entire program is based on them being able to engage and identify hazards and be able to take corrective action. And I know it's not a surprise to you, but it is to many of our listeners that many people that work within any type of business, whether it's a hospital, a retail store, a hotel, they really don't know all the time what constitutes a hazardous condition. I mean, you think it's common sense, but it's not always that way. Would you agree? I mean, not everybody knows what a hazard is. You have to teach them to identify hazards.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and I spent a lot of time with my management teams, making sure that, again, safety was always first and foremost. And every day we did huddles on every shift and we would always take 2 to 3 minutes to talk about something safety related. And obviously slips, trips, and falls were always one that we talked about all the time, because those are the ones that are going to happen most commonly. So we tell them, hey, make sure you pay attention to this. Are you wearing your slip resistant shoes? Are you doing? So we lived and breathed.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. Yes, you have to train them.
Yeah, and that's again, living and breathing it. It should become just second nature, but it always seems to be, and we see it today. Maybe it's just indicative of our culture. But there was a time growing up where people would walk into a building and wipe their feet on a floor mat. Today, people just kind of come into the business, the entranceway. They just walk across the floor. There might be a hazardous condition. They ignore it. I can't tell you how many cases I've been retained in as an expert witness, Michael, where you're watching store surveillance video and there's a flipped over mat at the front door. And there will be, 10 or 12 people come into the building, walk around the flipped over mat or walk over it. Never one of them to actually take the time to just, lay it flat. And then sure enough, here comes oftentimes the elderly woman who doesn't see that the mat was flipped up and she falls, she trips over it. And, common sense, again, is a bit different today than it was in the past. And you really have to go out of your way, whether you're just a pedestrian coming in and out of a business or an employee, to look for hazards. And if you find, for example, a flipped over floor mat, lay it flat. It just takes a few seconds to do. But again, that common sense approach that everybody, all of our listeners included, can take just to prevent injuries. The same is true in grocery stores. I can't tell you how many times I've worked on a case where there's a hazardous condition, say a puddle of water or something that was spilled, and the person who spills the water, spills the product, will actually just walk away. They knew what they did, but they just leave instead of staying with the spill or just taking a moment to maybe place a shopping cart over it and find an employee to come over and clean it. But it's just kind of the society that we live in, and I'm sure you see that as well in your profession. Is that fair to say?
It happens all of the time, and that's part of where I was going earlier when I was talking about, or when I mentioned that individuals would see a hazard, and instead of them cleaning it up or attempting to get someone to fix the problem, they would just walk right by it. And it happens all of the time, Russ. And whether it's hospitals, hotels, or what have you, that it's just the nature of how people operate. They don't want to take the time to fix a problem because they may be on their way to lunch or they may be on their way to break or whatever, but they won't take that extra 2 to 3 minutes to correct the problem that could potentially stop someone from having a serious accident.
Yeah, is that the truth or what? It just seems to be a chronic problem, and it's one that directly contributes to slips, trips, and falls, and the rising number of injuries is just taking, as you mentioned, that minute to get involved and to lay the mat flat, or if you see a wet spot or a spill, just take a minute to stand with the spill, make sure somebody doesn't walk through it. It's kind of being our brother's keeper, I guess. I don't know if you can teach that or not. It's more of a value than anything. But, if you were to sum it all up in your experience, what advice could you give our listeners to what they can do to prevent slips, trips, and falls? Any advice?
Yes. Train your employees. Spend time with them so that they understand what a true trip or slip scenario is. Make sure that they understand it. And by properly identifying, it'll make it easier for them to say, oh, I need to fix this, or I need to get this corrected. But you have to live and breathe it. You can't start it and then stop it. And there may be opportunities for you to set up mock scenarios so that they really get to understand exactly what the expectation is. But in my opinion, training is key. And everyone has to, again, be part of the solution. Otherwise, they become part of the problem.
Boy, isn't that the truth? We've been speaking with Michael Patterson, the president of the International Executive Housekeepers Association. And if folks want to get a hold of you, Michael, how is it they can reach you?
You could contact me at 800-225-4772. Again, my name is Michael Patterson. And once you call there, they'll transfer you to me. I also like to leave my email address if you prefer to email me. You could email me at Michael, MICHAELP, @ISSA.com. I'm happy to talk to you at any time. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for spending the time talking about an important subject and one that touches many different industries, specifically the housekeeping industry. So want to go ahead and thank you again for spending some time with us.
Well, Russ, thank you so much. I appreciate the time and, look forward to continuing to work with you, and feel free to call upon me anytime.